station, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? The referendum that took place in June 2016, we, the British people, were asked a question and assured in the government leaflet and elsewhere that whatever our decision, they would abide by it. What was the question? Maybe it's worth tonight just reminding ourselves where this whole thing started. It was, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? Wasn't very difficult, was it? Wasn't very complicated. And, you know, my cross went in that box. I voted to leave, and a majority voted to leave. And we were told it would be implemented. And what we've seen in the last 24 hours is Mrs. May signing up to a text, a 500-page text, which hasn't, by the way, yet been fully released, though there are plenty of leaks. And what we do know about this text is that we will stay in a customs union. We will stay with the European rule book, not just the existing rules, but all the new laws they pass as time goes on, but without, of course, having any say whatsoever. What we do know is we'll pay somewhere between 40 and 60 billion pounds for the privilege of them making our laws without us having any say whatsoever. We know that free movement will continue for several years without any change whatsoever. There'll be no change to the common fisheries policy for many, many years. And when it comes in the transition period after March the 29th, which is now an up to 3-year transition period at Theresa May's request, that when it comes to negotiating a future trade deal, written in the small print is that we'll have to abide by European rules until, wait for it, and if you're driving, slow down, 2030. And I wish I was making this up. And yet, when confronted with this reality, in Prime Minister's questions by Peter Bone, the Wellingborough Conservative MP, when he asks her, is this really Brexit, this is her response.
Can I say to my honourable friend that what we have been negotiating is a deal that does deliver on the vote of the British people. In the list that I set out earlier, I left out one of the things that the British people are very keen to see from this deal, which is an end to free movement, and we will ensure that we are delivering on that, as well as those other elements that I have set out. What we're doing is a deal that delivers on that vote, but in doing so protects jobs, protects the integrity of our United Kingdom, and protects the security of people in this country.
When will we end free movement? When will we get our fisheries back? When will we be able to make our own laws? Well, it looks like 2030 is now the date that's been decided on for some of it, and why should that change for all the rest of it? I simply cannot believe that we've got a Prime Minister who stands up and says Brexit means Brexit, but what she really means is Brexit means remain. I'm so angry today I can barely put it in words. I mean, this is the lowest point I've seen in my lifetime in terms of a British government and the trust that it has from the people. It's despicable. And it's not just my side that are angry. She's now being openly mocked by the other side. I mean, how about this from Tony Blair? I mean, it's quite remarkable. He says, I take my hat off to Ollie Robbins. That's the civil servant who's really in charge of Brexit. I take my hat off to Ollie Robbins. Ollie is a very skilled guy. The elaborate camouflage of all the different points is a tribute to the skill of the British civil service. I say that sincerely. Well, I've been arguing for some time that they are the enemy within. And the Evening Standard, of course, edited by George Osborne, the man who was Chancellor of the Exchequer in the referendum, threatened us with an emergency budget. And it's a big front page. Theresa May's head inside the European Union flag. EU takes back control. So she's being mocked from all sides. But a day of great drama. She is stuck as I understand it, still inside a cabinet meeting. There's a big dispute as to whether she's going to speak to the Commons tonight or do a press conference. And I'm going to go to Westminster and speak to Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, who has been watching every move of this during the afternoon. Theo, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Let me just clear up that last point for your listeners. There had been talk earlier today that what we'd see is the cabinet breaking up at around 5 o'clock this evening. There would then be the publication of that 500-page document, the withdrawal agreement, for us all to pore over, and then we would have a press conference to which Westminster journalists would be invited later on this evening. And then Nick Hurd, the policing minister, stood up in the House of Commons and told MPs that he'd been authorised to tell them that there would be no press statement. So we all thought the whole thing was collapsing in, that the cabinet was... that there was some massive hitch with the cabinet this evening. But it now turns out, just to clarify, there is going to be a short statement outside number 10. The microphone that is in place remains in place. No lectern, incidentally. And then there won't be a press conference as we'd previously envisaged. Now, the big question is, will we get to see the documents this evening, the withdrawal agreement? We don't know. We just don't know the answer to that question. We're hoping we'll get to see those documents this evening, obviously. But at the moment, we simply don't know. There is just, in terms of the choreography, a hitch, because they're not there simply for number 10 or the government to release those documents. They have to, dare I say it, clear it with the EU and the whole thing.
Oh, of course. Yeah, you've got to ask the bosses, obviously. So, I mean, Monsieur Barnier's in charge.
So you have to number 10 has to do these things in conjunction with the European Union. So there's really I can't shed any further light about whether we're going to see those documents this evening. But that's where we are at the moment. In terms of a finish time of the cabinet, we're told in the next hour, but we've already had significant pushback on that.
It's lasting longer than a UKIP NEC meeting. It's quite something. I do wonder, Theo, I mean, when the European Union's Deputy Chief Negotiator, Sabine Weyan, says about us, they must align their rules, but the EU will retain all controls. They apply the same rules. The UK wants a lot more from the future relationship, but it's the EU that retains its leverage. I mean, they are literally, and I've just been in the coffee bar, I'll call it that, shall I, before the show. And, I mean, they're openly mocking the British. They're laughing. They're saying, when's the second referendum going to happen? But, I mean, for Barnier's deputy to openly, publicly mock us, telling us that we align and they're in charge, are the Cabinet really going to put up with this?
The Cabinet have a choice, and there have been many Brexiteers. Mark Francois, when I spoke to him, former Defence Minister, said this morning, well, Cabinet ministers need to decide whether they want to roll around in their Jaguar ministerial cars with their red boxes and civil servants saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, or actually stand up for their conscience. He was quite clear, though, that was aimed at Cabinet ministers within Theresa May's top team who voted to leave and campaigned to leave the European Union. He dismissed Philip Hammond as being the Chancellor at Remain Central to me.
Well, indeed, Theo. I mean, come on, 2/3 of the Cabinet are Remainers, aren't they?
Yes, and of course, a penny for the thoughts of Boris Johnson and David Davis, former Foreign Secretary and Brexit Secretary, respectively, if they'd held on going through the summer and the autumn and actually decided to play their cards now, then it would be, then we could expect a much tougher opposition from the Cabinet than perhaps what we might see, and I doubt it, the resignations of somebody like Andrew Leadsom.
They'd still be in a minority. I tell you what, Theo, don't go too far away. Anything could happen in the next hour. I tell you what, I've just about had enough listening to all these appalling politicians and all this duplicitous behaviour. I want to hear from the great British public. Maybe that's where I'll find some common sense and some sanity. I think that simple question that we were asked to vote on is being betrayed. Tell me I've got it all wrong. Claire, a new caller from Ilkley in West Yorkshire. Claire, have I got this all wrong?
I hope not. Right. I just think it's an absolute joke. I think she should have just walked away right from the beginning. They were never, ever going to give us a good deal.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, it literally, Claire, it's game, set and match Monsieur Barnier, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think... I just don't even know what to think anymore. I think Theresa May were always going to have... she was a Remainer right from the beginning anyway, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I think what frightens me more than anything is that we're going to end up with a general election and Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, because that just frightens me to death, because we might as well just sign everything away now then.
Well, Claire, frankly, the Conservative Party deserves no better. I just, literally 5 minutes before this programme started, Claire, I met a Conservative MEP, and he was a Leave supporter, and he said, this deal's so bad, Nigel, I'm thinking maybe now we need to stay. Do you think that's what Theresa May had planned from the beginning?
Yes, I do. I think she's always had that in mind, which is frightening.
Shocking. Claire, I wish I could cheer you up. I can't. Thank you. Tony's a new caller from Birmingham. Hi, Tony. So
Hi,
tell me.
Nigel, how are you doing?
Well, I'm absolutely, I really am fuming, Tony.
You and me both, Nigel. I just want to say one thing, though. A huge, great big thank you, I'm sure, on behalf of 17.4 million people for what you've done to bring us about. There's two people in Europe I would thank. One is yourself, and the other is Mrs. Merkel for giving us a chance to have the referendum.
I couldn't agree more. Well done, Mrs. But 3 cheers for Mrs. Merkel. Her policy errors helped us win the referendum. But, Tony, I mean, surely our Parliament is going to vote this deal down, isn't it?
75% Remainers, Nigel. I'm not so sure. What I would say is a total sellout. It's a national humiliation. May has to go. She has no confidence. We have to have a leaver in charge, and the only way to win this now is to go for a deal on WTO terms, and that would turn the tables immediately. But do we have the courage to do that? Do we have the courage to do that?
But she has to go, Tony. She has to go. I was on telly this morning on Good Morning Britain with Colonel Bob Stewart, Beckenham MP, great fun, like him. He was asked, what would you do if a military commander had led an operation like this? He said, court-martial them, which I laughed at. And then I said, well, Bob, is your letter in to get rid of her? Oh, well, not quite yet. They've got to get a backbone, Tony, haven't they?
This is the problem, Nigel. This is the problem.
I know it is. Thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show at 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Lee. The Cabinet meeting has now been going on for 4 hours and 15 minutes, and maybe they need reminding what the referendum was all about. It was very simple. Should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? That is what the referendum was about, and what Mrs. May is done whilst telling us she was going to deliver Brexit. She wants us to remain. Angela Merkel yesterday gave us a clue, didn't she? She told us Mrs. May wants to stay part of Europe. You bet your life she does. I see this as an absolute betrayal. I see it as the worst deal in history. Please tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. And we need common sense from the great British public, because we ain't going to get it from the Commons right at the moment. I'm going to go to Rochester and speak to Sarah, a new caller to the show. Good evening, Sarah.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to talk to you. Well, what I get incensed about is the way that everybody keeps slagging her off and putting her down and all the rest of it. What would you do if you were in her position? What would you do?
Lead.
Okay, then tell me how you change. And I'm not being rude to you.
Well, what you do, Sarah...
There are lots of them out there who are all doing the same, all these bully boys who are all standing on their platforms and calling the shots and everything. And if they were dumped in that position, what would they do? They want to know what to do.
All right, Sarah, I'll try this on you, right? 10 days before the referendum, after a meeting with economists for Brexit, I come up with a phrase: no deal is better than a bad deal. And that was to explain what we would do if economic sense did not prevail with the European Union. Mrs. May then picked that up because she understood that it was really rather popular, and she parroted, no deal is better than a bad deal. What she said today is a bad deal is better than no deal. And everything, Sarah, everything she stood up and said, she's reversed. I think she's the most dishonest, duplicitous Prime Minister I've seen in my lifetime. That's how I feel about it.
Okay, well, I think you've got the wrong end of the stick with her. I think she's probably one of the most genuine people one of the most genuine politicians there is. She really, really is trying hard to give the people what they want. I don't believe that she wants to. She may have wanted to stay originally. She's got too much principle to carry that through. She's that kind of person that she will do what the country voted to do. And also, the point is, don't you think she might have been using that to haggle a bit or to give them some sort of thoughts that we're going to walk. You don't want to do it. We may walk away. You be careful. That kind of thing.
No. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's what any business negotiation needs.
Exactly.
The trouble is, Sarah, they never believed her.
Well, no, that may have been the downfall of it, but that's not her fault. It's just her personality. So, okay, let somebody else go into that driving seat and do that. Who are you going to put in there to do that? Who do you think is strong enough and good enough to negotiate in that way, in that powerful position, to swing these French people around, these French, Barbier? Who's going to be able to? You could actually probably do that.
I'd love to have a crack at it, Sarah, but they wouldn't touch me with a barge pole, obviously, because I'm not a Tory, and it's all about they're very snobby bunch. But Sarah, my answer to you is anybody would have done a better job than her. Anybody that believed in it, and I'm afraid, I think she's finished up completely betraying us and being duplicitous. But you say she's done the best job, and I thank you.
Well, I don't think anybody would want to be really in her shoes at the moment doing this, for all the shouting they do on the sidelines. And I'll ask you the question once again as I started: what would you do? I mean, not one sort of word and say you would.
Very easy. Sarah, it's dead easy. We'd offer you a simple free trade deal. Take it or leave it. You got 8 weeks and walk out the room. They'd bite our arms off.
Maybe that's what she's trying. Maybe that was what she was trying to do, and that's why she said, "If it doesn't work, we're going. We're out."
No, Sarah, she announced at that speech in Florence that she wanted to opt back in to have a very close relationship with the European Union, and that's what she's got, and look at the price. Anyway, Sarah, I respect the point of view that you think she's a very honest woman. What does Mark in Aldershot thinks? Mark, hi there.
Hello, Nigel. I thought she's actually pulled an absolute blinder. We voted, and we voted to leave. We voted to leave, and then she spent 2 years kicking the can down the road, telling us, no bill's better than a no deal, we're going to leave and everything else. Now this lovely blinder, where you produce something that the Remainers are going to dislike and the people that want to leave are going to dislike. So then what is everybody in the whole of the UK going to be worried about? Let's get back in. Let's get back and get the deal. Let's get back into Europe.
No. You may well be right. You may well be right. You may be right.
That's quite simple. It's not a very good deal, so we leave. Let's go. And I just think she's pulled an absolute blinder to pull it over the wool of everybody's eyes, where democracy is not being stood up for. And why are people in Parliament not sticking by the things that they're supposed to be brought up and grow up in the UK and Britain and believe in politicians? Now, all I'm doing now is looking at Theresa May, thinking to myself, I didn't really have much faith in Parliament. And now, after 2 years, and she's delivered this, and why would I want people in Brussels to make other decisions for us? That's all I wanted to say.
She says we're taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders. Our laws will be tied to 2030. It's going to cost us up to 60 billion quid and no change in the borders. Terrific. But, Mark, it could all be part of a cunning plan. You may well be right. What does Frank, a new caller from the Netherlands, think? Hello, Frank.
Hello, Nigel. Well, I'm in complete and absolute agreement with you. I think she's the worst Prime Minister in the history of this country. I mean, Michael Foot struggled a bit, and so did one or two.
He was never Prime Minister.
No, that's true. But in terms of honesty,
and also, Frank, can I say he was a brilliant public speaker. He was a great intellectual. He was also a super patriot, and I remember him in the '75 referendum saying, "People think we have to be part of the European community because we're not good enough to run our own country. I think we are." So even though I'm not from the left like him, I've got a great deal of respect for Michael Foot, but I've got no respect for this Prime Minister, Frank. None.
Well, I don't have either, and I think, really, to be honest, she was a pro-Brexiteer, we all know it, and she's proved it. She was a wolf in sheep's clothing, or the other way around, actually, if we think about it. But the reality of the situation is this, there's no principles in politics. Principles in life are expensive, but without them, life is very cheap. You're one of the few people, I'm not necessarily on your side on all things, but I think you're a great communicator, and you do it without. I mean, I see Jeremy Corbyn in Houses of Parliament, and he's always looking down. He's always reading. You know, the best orators, the best communicators, Michael Foot inclued, were people who could look up and speak and communicate.
Chins up.
And
absolutely.
This is the reality of the situation. Theresa May is a civil servant, a glorified civil servant, nothing more.
Well, I think you're being too kind to her. I think she just does the bidding of the civil servants. And this is an Ollie Robbins Remainer civil service Brexit, Frank. It's a disgrace. What do your mates in the Netherlands make of the Brexit process?
Well, it's fairly mixed. I think the majority of people are still more or less in favour of staying in the European Union, but they see the three musketeers of Barnier, Juncker and Verhofstadt being nothing more than unelected representatives. I've had many chats about this, and you're very true on that. I mean, very right. And yet it's like a Roman Empire. They dictate, they determine, they change the rules when they feel like it, and everyone has to face the consequences of their actions. I think it's outrageous.
Got to tell you, Frank, I sit in seat number 20, Juncker's in seat number 21. He was steaming yesterday afternoon. He was barracking, laughing, slurring his words and having a very merry time. But then again, you see, when you've got power without accountability, do what the hell you like. Frank, I thank you. Chris in Burton tweets, can you imagine the trouble if Scotland had voted for independence and this happened? There would be trouble. I suspect, Chris, that may well be right. John in Manchester says, is this the day Britain died of shame? I tell you what, John, we're getting pretty damn close to it. Simon in Glasgow says, unfortunately, our Prime Minister has never understood that a vote to go was not about the percentage they won by, it was about the direction taken, and it was an order from the majority. I'm staying with Glasgow. I'm going to Ralph, who's a new caller. Hi, Ralph.
Good evening to you, Nigel. How are you doing?
I am furious. I'm really, I normally watch this stuff and I can accept there's a bit of give, bit of take, but Ralph, this is the worst deal in history. It's appalling. If Parliament doesn't vote this down, goodness knows where this country's going to be, is what I think. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, well, I'll tell you, I'm actually an ex-serviceman, and I'm actually totally disgusted with the government, not just Mrs May, but her whole government, who have allowed this woman to carry on giving smokescreen after smokescreen to deflect from what we all voted for.
Yeah. So does she need to go, Ralph?
She's needed to have been going for the last 2 years. Right?
What you really mean is she should never have started?
She should never have taken the job on. And it's so aggravating now. But what I will say is, Mrs May and the Tory government have lit a fuse. And whether you are for it or against the Brexit vote, it doesn't matter. The fact that the democracy of this country has been totally undermined, and just it's not been actually even taken on board that however many voted to leave, however many voted to stay.
It's been a betrayal.
Swept underneath the carpet.
It's a betrayal. Ralph, your point about democracy is a powerful, emotive and correct one, and I thank you. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30 in time for the news with Lisa Aziz. For callers like Sarah earlier who think I'm always on Mrs May's case and being negative about it, I want to tell you this. In January 2017, I just started working for LBC. She gave her Lancaster House speech. I, on this show, albeit broadcast an hour later, praised her to the rooftops. I said I couldn't believe that a British Prime Minister was using the same words and phrases that I'd used for 20 years. I more than gave her the benefit of the doubt, but when I heard a few months later, when I heard her in Florence saying we would opt back in to parts of the European Union, I said and I wrote that I feared the great Brexit betrayal had begun, and today it is complete. It is a total betrayal of Brexit. It is the worst deal in history. Why would you give away nearly 60 billion quid to continue having your laws made somewhere else over which you have no say whatsoever, and where, we're waiting for the small print, Northern Ireland effectively might just get hived off as well? Why would you do that? Somebody tell me I'm wrong. Anthony is a new caller from Chelsea. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
Well, I think you can tell, can't you? Absolutely. I'm normally in control, but I'm absolutely beat furious.
I can tell. Well, I have something to say on it. Among all the talks of betrayal and smoke screens and whatnot, you very helpfully, several times this evening, read us the exact text of the referendum question. And it is whether we want to leave the European Union. On that basis, the deal that's put on the table, from what we know of it, you can say what you like about the details, and I'm not sure I approve of it. But actually, on delivering on that question, it will do. We will leave the EU in March 2019. Now, it may not satisfy your own personal...
Well, hang on.
That is a fact.
Hang on. The customs union and single market are integral parts of the European Union. I mean, you're right in one regard, Anthony. You're right in one regard.
Thank you.
This may give us Brexit in name only. But what's the point of it?
Well, I quite agree. What's the point in any of it, really? I mean, I would refer to what Andrew Rawnsley said this week, is that, the problem with Brexit isn't Theresa May. The problem with Brexit is Brexit.
I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't disagree more.
Entirely. And that's fine. But there was never any prospect of her coming, or the negotiation team coming away with this golden, sunlit uplands deal that would answer everyone's questions and deliver on the promises that were made during the referendum, because they could never be delivered. The circle could never be squared.
Oh, yes, they could. We voted to become an independent... Because we voted to become an independent country. And do you know what, Anthony? Independent countries make their own laws, control their own borders, choose their own relationships around the world. Independent countries, by the way, Anthony, are quite as capable of mismanaging themselves as the European Union is. The great thing is, every 4 or 5 years, you can sack them and replace them with somebody else. And Anthony, I mean, Brexit's entirely doable, but you need a leader that believes in it. And I would just say this to you. Every single leading player in both the Remain and the Leave side made it clear that a vote to leave was to leave all of the EU's institutions. It could not have been clearer.
Well, just be careful about that, because actually that's not true. I think the single market and customs union, they are different. And we do obviously have countries that are members of those institutions without being members of the European Union. So that's not true. And those were options that were laid on the table during the referendum. There was much talk about the Norway model and such like. So those were options. And I'm sure
we talked about it. Of course we talked about it. But ultimately, the key players on both sides made it clear, a vote to leave, we're leaving the EU's institutions. And what she's trying to do here is to give us Brexit in name only. And Anthony, I mean, the truth of it is, what we're seeing today is genuine Brexiteers are enraged. Remainers are openly mocking her. I mean, don't you think to some extent this is the worst of all worlds?
Well, I'm not going to argue with the fact that it doesn't sound like a great deal. Obviously, we haven't read the text either of us, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be very good for anyone. But I go back to my earlier point. I don't think anyone would have come back with much better. But, I also think, your earlier caller asked what you would have done, and I'm afraid, saying, well, we would have just fallen out and crashed out and gone to the World Trade Organization.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. No, Anthony, I did not say that.
Than a bad deal.
I said during the referendum campaign, no deal is better than a bad deal, which, hey, it's just plain common sense. Right. But since, Anthony, my first ever political speech was in November 1993, right? And I said in that speech, I want us to leave political union and to replace that with a genuine free trade agreement, which is what we thought we'd signed up for in the first place. And I've been saying that, Anthony, for 25 years, and I would have pushed as hard as I could for a genuine free trade deal, something which I believe was wholly attainable. This all went wrong when the British Prime Minister, when the mask slipped with that Florence speech, when she tried to opt us back in. And I think, Anthony, and I'm going to say this, I think that Angela Merkel yesterday was right when she said the British Prime Minister wants to stay part of Europe.
Well, yes, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but at the moment, the deal that we're hearing about, the end state of that is to have a genuine free trade agreement. at the end of it, the third stage.
Yeah, and tied into EU rules till 2030. Anthony, thanks for the call, and Anthony makes the point that literally he believes that's being honoured. And I understand why he says that, but it's certainly not within the spirit or what was said by leading players in that campaign. Carol in Southampton text, I'm absolutely furious with Theresa May. She has betrayed us. Mr Barnier and Juncker must be laughing at us. She must go. No, Carol, they're all laughing at us. I've been here all day. They think it's really, really funny. I suppose from their perspective it is. Scott in Brixton says, Sarah, your caller needs to know that a child of 6 could have done better. Barnier has sat there and done nothing apart from say no to Mrs May, and she's given away on everything. She is pathetic. Some people are fooled. Wake up. She's a Remainer. Her sidekick's a Remainer. Her Chancellor's a Remainer. I want out more than ever. I am incandescent with rage. Folks, these are not normal political times. We can normally debate things. There can be some anger. But this is of, I would suggest to you, a very different level. Lee is a new caller from Boston in Lincolnshire. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
Well, I think you can tell, Lee, can't you?
Yeah, I can, mate. It's interesting that the point you made, and I think it should be focused on, is you used the word leadership. And I think it's too easy. We've got to the point now, 2 years down the line, that Brexit's become that complicated for people. Another caller talked about smokescreen. For me, you talk about people not walking on solid ground anymore, and it confuses people. And actually, when you go back to the very, very basics of it, I think Brexit could have been delivered, and it comes down to leadership. And you talked about the Lancaster House speech, and that was the one when she got me on that one. I thought, here we go, this is a leader. And I actually think the country needed, at that time, there is a division when it was let's say it's a close result, but I'm believing democracy big style, and I'll tell you now I voted Leave. But when she made that speech, that's what the country was actually crying out for, was leadership, and it was all there. And then, like you, over time, it was a backslide. Slowly but surely, the words change.
Yes.
And to start with, again, it took a while, probably. She's very good. There was one of your callers, she said, I really think Theresa May's trying her best and doing a good job. Everyone should remember what happened to David Davis. And that's when I was shocked, I must admit. Remember, he was the Brexit secretary. And up until a few days before Chequers, he's been doing the negotiation on behalf of the British government, mate, honestly.
I know.
And then literally, I don't know if the listeners, they need to remember that guy hears from the news media that there's another paper, and he's confused, and he goes to see the Prime Minister and says to her, what's this other way, what's this other paper? And then finds out that for something like 8 months, Ollie Robbins and his team has been making another...
Well, I mean, Lee, he had to resign, didn't he?
Yeah, of course he did, and I'm actually a big fan of his, really. He's doing the best he can. You can see with the Conservatives, the caught between, they want shot of her, I know they do, but at the same time, you say that, Nige, but with a party like that...
Where's their guts, Lee? Where's their guts?
It's easy for us to say those things, but that for me was the shocking period.
I tell you,
when I really realised that this person... I went to Parliament today, Nige. I contacted...
Did you?
I've never been interested in politics, and probably working class guy, like everybody else, not interested in politics. And then the referendum happened, and you've got to remember the political classes. It was interesting because they make a mistake here. They demanded we took part. People that weren't interested in politics were told.
And they promised us, Lee. They promised us, Lee. They'd abide by it. They really did. Lee, I'm going to let you go. Time is running out. Love your passion. And isn't it interesting? There are lots of Lees, people who were not interested in politics, but this referendum got them involved and interested. I've been saying for some time that I think the Cabinet will approve this deal. I still do. I've also said for some time that I suspected she'd get it through Parliament, but this is now so bad, that I think it's 50-50 now whether she gets this through Parliament. I'm going to pray tonight that it gets kicked out by Parliament. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. Time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Well, the Tories are in trouble with this, but in many ways the whole political class are in trouble with this. John from Lincoln says, I'm disgusted at the political class. They've no idea what damage they're doing to democracy. At the next election, it will damage both the Conservative and Labour parties. Yeah, but John, with a two-party system, in the end, one of them's actually going to win this unless something really really radical happens in British politics. Odin says, I've never voted Labour in my life, but after this betrayal, I will vote the Socialists in. Odin, you're not the first I've heard say that over the course of the last few weeks. Let's go to Grays and speak to Joanne, another new caller to this show. Joanne, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I'm all right. Now, you're from a very Leave part of the country, aren't you?
Very exceptionally Leave. Been a Leaver for, I can't remember when. I've never, ever supported being in the EU.
Right.
But obviously this was the opportunity, well, so we thought, to actually have the vote to make a decision on whether or not we stayed. And I believe that Theresa May has just starred as the enemy within. She's been like a Trojan horse that's been shipped in to do the wonderful things that she promised at the beginning, and at every opportunity she's turned against it. The flyover to Belgium, to Brussels last Christmas over the backstop.
Humiliating, wasn't it?
She folded like a cheap tent. It was just unbelievable. And in that situation, her cabinet should have looked at it and said, look, we really need to look at where she actually is on this. And since then, she's had cabinet ministers who've been Brexiteers actually resigning, and she's replaced them all with Remainers. So as a member of the public, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking she is going to take us down that road. Whatever way she can, she is going to keep us closely aligned. The Dominic Raab situation, that was all a ploy, because she said she was then going to take over and deal with negotiations herself. How often has she been flying over there to deal with the negotiations? Robbie, what's his name, Robbins, he's been dealing with it the whole time.
Yeah, it's the civil servants doing it.
I didn't vote for him.
No, quite. Just as you didn't vote for Monsieur Barnier. Joanne, one thing that strikes me about Grays, and I've been there a couple of times, and I've spoken a couple of times down there, is...
My husband and my son actually went to see you in Purfleet.
Right, well, there you go. I've done a couple of big events down there, big crowds. One of the things that struck me about Grays, a lot of people voted in that referendum who had never voted in their lives, and I worry with what this Prime Minister is doing.
I think what you're going to get from on the back of this is people who have voted all their lives potentially never voting again because they feel that they're actual democratic. I don't believe we live in a democracy. I don't believe that people really have a say about what goes on and how things are dealt with. And this was the first opportunity, I believed, that we could potentially get the people's voice heard. Although I thought I was a bit of a sceptic. I thought, no, I think we'll get it. But as soon as she came in, and I started to see how she's approaching it.
She's got to go, Joanne. She's got to go. Got to go. You're absolutely a star. You're a star. Thank you. So
thank
the cabinet.
You, Nigel.
No, thank you very much indeed for that and the passion. And lots of people down there in Grays had never voted before. Will they ever vote again? I wonder.
Well, if there's any march on it, we will be there.
All right.
I've never marched for anything, but I will be at the front.
Okay, we'll make it peaceful. I'll be there with you, Joanne. Thank you. Well, we're getting news now that the Cabinet meeting is breaking up right now. We may get news in the next few minutes. We may not. It may be over to Ian Dale after 7 o'clock. I'm going down to Wandsworth to speak to Robert, another new caller. Gosh, the phone lines are buzzing. Robert.
Well, it's an important time, Nigel, so
it is.
I'm sure they will be buzzing. Well, I don't feel well. I feel physically sick.
Do you?
By what I'm hearing this afternoon and rolling out into the evening. I feel physically sick. I do not want to talk about the past because we know that this is, in my opinion, this is treason.
Treason?
So,
well,
treason.
Strong word.
This is
strong
not
word.
treason, me. This is treason. Treason.
Wow.
And I don't want to talk about the past because I think all your listeners know how we've all been stuffed by this. So
now,
we've
Robert,
got to look to the future.
You've
got to decide
you've got a very
do about this.
You've got a very strong view. You've used a very strong word in treason, yet you've never called me before. Is today the final straw for you?
There were many final straws, but I'm thinking for our population, of the people, our citizens, if we believe in democracy, then we have to act and we have to do something about it. And everybody should contact their MPs tomorrow
to vote down this deal
and say, I'm not putting up with this anymore. Maybe we should all shout out the window like Network, the film, and say, I am not putting up with this anymore. If we allow them to do this to us, then we've only got ourselves to blame. So let's talk about the now and the future.
No, OK, Robert, let's lobby our MPs. I completely agree with that. I'm going to go to Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. What news, Theo?
Well, we're still waiting for Theresa May and Nigel to come out into Downing Street to face the cameras and to give that short statement. But from what I understand, that cabinet meeting now, after nearly 5 hours, is starting to break up. It is impossible for cabinet ministers to leave simply by the main entrance because of levels of protest along Whitehall today. But once that meeting has broken up, we are expecting the Prime Minister to come out and deliver a short statement. We are then hoping to actually see the detail, the 500 pages, or at least a breakdown of those 500 pages that make up the withdrawal agreement.
So the 500. So the 500 pages, we hope are going to get published. And is that why the cabinet meeting took so long, in your opinion?
It took so long, I think, because of the levels of dissent, of worry, of concern. And to be honest with you, Nigel, we still don't know what is going to be contained within that statement from the Prime Minister. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves that she's going to come out and say that everything is fine, because we don't know that for certain yet.
And Theo, and I'm asking you, putting you on the spot here, do you think the atmosphere, the temperature has changed in terms of the letters of no confidence going into the chairman of the 1922 committee?
I've just been speaking to Conor Burns, and we're just trying to turn around that interview for Ian Dale. So apologies, Nigel, I haven't been able to get it into your show, but if you keep listening, we'll be able to hear it. And he was saying to me that he wouldn't be surprised if letters, and he used this term, were organically going into Sir Graham Brady, the 1922 committee. When I was speaking to another Remain MP, a different Remain MP, because of course Conor Burns is leave, he was saying the mood amongst the Remainers is now hardened. There's a stiffening of the mood, that there is a feeling amongst the Conservative MPs they simply cannot tolerate this deal, that there's been this united...
It's just so bad, isn't it? From their perspective. Now, that's really interesting. Theo, I think I sense this as well. I sense this is just so bad that even though I've criticised them all since July for not having the guts to stand up, actually, the truth of it is...
something's changed.
It looks like something has changed. Theo, thank you ever so much for that. Well, so many of your calls I can't get to. So many of you who've never called me or called LBC before but are motivated by this. You know, these are not normal times we're living in. The cabinet meeting is breaking up. We'll find out more over the course of the next few minutes, I've no doubt. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow night from 6 in London. At 10 tonight...